Hi everyone, TSW here. I hope this video finds you well. I'm playing on a private server, so please take everything that you see in the background with a pinch of salt. This is not the beta. These are not necessarily Blizz-like values, although they will give you some idea of what to expect. So my gear, I'll have it on screen now, is as follows. It's pretty good. I'd say it's like 85% BIS P1. So my gear is very good. A lot of people have written off DPS Warrior for phase 1, and I do not agree with them. These are the same, well, not the same people necessarily, but the same sort of people, the same kind of opinions that people had for phase 1 TBC for DPS Warriors, and I didn't agree with them, and I don't agree with them now. In TBC, people were saying that DPS Warriors are going to suck and they'd only be good in tier 6, and no, they were good before. On private servers, DPS Warriors on certain fights were basically guaranteed number 1 damage, like Hydros, Whirlwind, Cleave. Bro, on those ads, you do insane damage, and then you just do good enough damage on Hydros and you're number 1. Easy. The blacksmithing maces, easy to get and insane damage. The same is true for Wrath of the Lich King Fury. For the first week, for the clears of the initial tier 7 content, I think that Arms will be better. At least that's my experience. Arms is a very clunky, and by clunky I mean broken, on the beta. You can't use overpower on the beta. So one of your main abilities just doesn't work. You press overpower and nothing happens. So that's an issue. So hopefully we can see, like, for the remaining time that the beta's open, overpower actually working properly and get some idea of how good Arms is there. But because the raids are now closed, you're not going to learn how good Arms is in raids. But generally speaking, if you're in low gear, Arms is the way, and hopefully you're only in low gear for the first week or so. By week 2, you've got your crafted epic BOEs. You know, you're in more pre-raid BIS gear. However, if you're in a guild where you're out leveling everybody and you're maybe not raiding for the first week, and you can commit to getting the jaw crafting crafted neck and ring, you've got the blacksmithing helmet and mace, you might be good enough maybe to go Fury first week, but I'd still probably lean towards being Arms maybe. But anyway, like I say, I'm in like close to BIS gear on this server, and I'd say I'm better geared than, like, I hate to use gear score generally, but just for context, if I'm 4.2k gear score right now, I'd say the rest of the raid averages about 4k, 4.1k. There are a few more people in the raid with a similar gear score to me. So my gear is pretty good, and I am definitely in the top half, maybe top third, probably top third of geared players in the raid. Also, I'm pre-potting, so I'm using an armor pot when I remember. It doesn't mean I do an insane amount more damage. It just gives me, there's like 32, 35 attack power for 2 minutes on the pull. So just because I'm pre-potting doesn't mean that I'm doing an insane amount of damage. I do have the Dark Moon card, which does mean I do a noticeable amount more damage. And my weapons are from 25-man Nax. But yeah, I mean, other people are doing damage as well. Let's be real. And have similar enough gear to me as well. Oh, I'm also whoring the damage here. If you want to do loads of damage on Mexner, there is a timer on DBM for when his ads are spawning. And you can just save a whirlwind and even save your engineering Saunite bomb for when the ads spawn. So you saw me there, just move forward, get a whirlwind and some cleaves on the ads. Maybe you proc a victory rush as well, which is good. Oh, also, just something to give me a bit more props. I'm the only warrior in this raid. I'm having to maintain Sunder armors. Some fights I'm stacking 5 Sunders initially, straight away. But other times I'm like, ugh, I don't want to do this. I want to pump. So in my empty global fillers, I'm using a Sunder armor. So I do both here. Sometimes it's I'm playing for the team, sundering to 5 straight away, and other times I'm sundering late just so I can do some damage myself. One thing that I always do when I'm playing DPS, and I don't play DPS as like a main spec that often. I main spec DPS in the initial classic launch when it was vanilla, like a few years ago, and Nax 25 here on this server. One of the best things that I do to increase my damage is I record all the raid footage and just look at how long the raid fights took us, the boss fights. Okay, well, I die here. So, yeah, like, it's my fault, sure. I shouldn't have gone in with full HP. But at the same time, like, it's so awkward not having the slime patch to reduce your HP in melee range of the boss. Do you know what I mean? Like, I need to talk to these tanks or something because, like, I've said it before, but, like, just tank it so melee can dip in the water. Like, you have to go out of melee range. Anyway, I'm just triggered. Okay, where was I? Talking about TBC or something. Oh, yeah, about when I play DPS. So I record the footage of the fight. Let's say that we have... Actually, let me open the spreadsheet quickly and I'll talk you through. I might even show the spreadsheet on screen. So what you do is just find, like, say that we've got a patchwork, okay? And according to this, last time I updated it, patchwork was a 5-minute and 4-second fight. Although it has been quicker. 4 minutes and 33 seconds. So basically, once you know the duration of the fight, you can work out when you want to use your cooldowns. So if you have like your 2-minute cooldowns and the fight is 4 minutes 30, you can use your cooldowns at 0 on the pull. You can use your cooldowns at 2 minutes, and you can use your cooldowns at 4 minutes. But let's say, for example, at 4 minutes, the boss isn't quite in execute range. You just delay your 4-minute cooldowns and use it in the execute window. And that's really, really simple. And what you can also do is like, I play DPS Warlock now on Classic, and in Sunwell, essentially you just have a like a boss combat timer. And, you know, on the pull, you use 2-minute cooldowns and lust maybe. And then 2 minutes into the fight, you use 2-minute cooldowns again and a second lust maybe. And then if the fight's long enough, you know, you just like synchronize your cooldowns up with like the time of the fight. And it works really well. Also, you can get a good idea of when execute phase is going to occur. And you can just be like, oh, wow, like I play a troll in a horde if I'm playing Wrath of the Lich King. I think it's the best. And my troll racial, you know, if the fight is less than 3 minutes, I want to save my berserking racial for haste for the execute phase. But if the fight is, you know, 3 minutes and 20 seconds, I want to use berserking right on the pull so that I have that 20-second predicted window where I can use it again during the execute phase. So a lot of these fights, I'll be using my cooldowns immediately on the pull because I know that the fight is maybe like a 3-minute fight or something, and I want to make sure that I have my berserking up again. You'll see it in some fights during execute phase. Sometimes I will, sometimes I won't have berserking, and that will just tell you that it's, you know, more than a 3-minute fight. And perhaps like Grobbulus, the next boss, I don't think I quite get berserking up again. So next week when we do this raid, the idea is I don't berserking on the pull. So what you can see now is I'm holding off on my Death Wish, and I've got berserking and recklessness coming up soon, and they'll be used during execute phase. Now I did die on the pull. Criminal on the DPS meter is the Ret Paladin, who also died on the pull. So this doesn't really give you a good example of my single target DPS, but yeah, it's something. These fights take ages. Like with Blizzard increasing the HP of the fights on Classic Wrath, it's going to be more of the same. Like I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer or whatever, but yeah, I do think a lot of the fights are going to be kind of boring in the sense that they just take so long, and you're there just smashing your keyboard and your rotation for so long. Patchwork being one of them, Kel'Thuzad definitely being one of them. Phase 1 is so boring of Kel'Thuzad. Also, Phase 2 is so boring. It's just... They take so long. And it's like, okay, we get it. Excuse me. I'm here like burping. Oh, this pack, I do an insane amount of damage. And if you're wondering what the green circle is that you see often on my mouse, that's the engineering Saronite bomb. So I just macro it into my Bloodthirst, although quite honestly I think I'll end up macroing it into my Whirlwind as well. So you just have /cast Whirlwind /use Saronite bomb, and I'll do my spell, whether it be Bloodthirst or Whirlwind, as normal, and then it will just send the Saronite bomb, like /use Saronite bomb, and then I just need to click with the green circle whenever I want to throw it. The great thing about Saronite bomb is that there is no cast. It doesn't interrupt your swing timer, so it's basically a use ability. So you think about it just being extra ability. It's so good, and I think everyone more or less should be going engineering, like for the same reason that engineering is really good in TBC Classic and Vanilla 60 Classic. It's going to be super strong in Wrath of the Lich King Classic as well, particularly with like the Slowfall Cloak enchant. You know, the regular enchant is 22 agility for physical, and you get 23 agility, and the Slowfall Cloak parachute, so you get one more agility and you get to Slowfall as well. Grobbulus, this is a really interesting fight. I don't know if on Classic, if the breath that Grobbulus does one-shots you, but on this server it does. So what I have done previously is been really greedy on damage and been stood sometimes in front of the boss to whirlwind the extra ooze. Now, I really try and refrain from doing that, because I know that if the boss is going to use his breath, it's going to one-shot me. But what you can do is, as soon as these slimes spawn, the ooze slimes, you can just target them and cross your fingers that you get threat. And then as long as you've got threat, you've got an infinite rage supply of the damage done to you by the slime. And you can just cleave to your heart's content and do good damage. So you can see on the damage meter, I'm 4th, 3rd here now. And it's mostly just because I'm spamming cleave and using whirlwind. That's it. And that's really obviously where the Fury Warrior excels. One thing that I mentioned a bit ago on my stream is Arms Warriors generally, like I say, are good for the first week when you have poor gear. And then like week 2, when you get a couple of pieces of gear or a new weapon or something, Fury just comes out ahead and you never look back. It's always Fury from there onwards. It's a very small time frame that Arms beats Fury. But one thing that I will say is, if fights are very quick on Classic, let's say you have like a 1-minute fight or something, then if you're able to capitalize a Blade Storm or two, that could really shift things in the Arms Warrior favor. For example, I don't know, what's a good fight where there are lots of ads? Like consistently 4 or 5 hours. Is it possible to do 4 horsemen where you're killing all 4 horses at the same time? I don't know. But let's say that, for example, there's a Zerg strat where that's the case. Blade Storm is going to be very good there, because you can just Blade Storm while all 4 ads are up and just crush through them. Maybe you want to even stack up on multiple Arms Warriors for that. I don't know. But that's the sort of thing where if you're able to utilize that to the fullest, then that might be best. We'll see. But generally speaking, like particularly on long fights where you're not going to be able to have Blade Storm uptime very high, then the consistent whirlwind cleave, just having rage, you have lots of rage as Fury. It's really nice. Although having said that, the last time I did play Arms was when I was a lot less geared. So maybe, I don't know, like I want to keep pumping as Fury and see what I can do and just keep pushing the envelope of the damage. But also it would be fun to maybe do one raid as Fury with this level of gear, just to have a comparison to see what it's like. I really like the Weakor I have above my player frame for my Sunder Armor. I made it myself. And it just changes color and goes red when Sunder Armor starts to fade. I think it's really cool. It's definitely something that I want to bring into Classic with me. So here we are on Gluth. I think my damage is pretty good. Like, I feel like, am I the only one that thinks that Fury Warrior rotation isn't the easiest? Or am I just being a little boomer and it's super easy? I mean, you have to always be watching out for your slam procs, for your instant slams. And I don't know. I mean, it's getting easier. Like, you get in the flow of it a lot more. I remember when I first started playing Fury, I was just having to like constantly look at my abilities. But you do get into the flow of it. You know, Bloodthirst having, I think, a 6-second cooldown. You are bloodthirsting consistently. And if you are spending a global outside of your rotation when you have a free global, it's basically always going to be after or almost always, or the best time to use a free global is after a bloodthirst, if you don't have anything else to use afterwards. So, for example, coming up now, I've got a bloodthirst. There's the bloodthirst, and I've got nothing available. So I pop in a rend to deal rend damage. Or you would substitute the rend for a sunder armor or something, just so you do something with your free global. Or you could use commanding shout. I'm not using commanding shout. You know, this is a farm raid, we're not going to die, and I want to be cheeky and save myself the global cooldown. And then again, obviously, just maintaining the sunder armors. Like, warrior does kind of like, also talking about the quick fights. If you have a fight again that lasts 60 seconds, let's say, and you're having to spend 5 globals on pull stacking sunder armor, that can be a little bit awkward. I do feel like, you know, warrior is a really fun class to play because particularly in tier 7, you are the underdog and you do have huge potential. And that's one of the reasons that I'm really drawn towards DPS warrior in Wrath of the Lich King Classic, is because you are the underdog. Like, so many people have written off DPS warriors, and number one, I want to prove them wrong, and like number two, it's like the progression of the warrior is there. You know, you like everyone agrees that you're going to be insane damage in the later tiers of Wrath of the Lich King, and I'm essentially in this video saying you're going to be doing good damage even towards the end of tier 7. I've said that, you know, having played multiple private servers as warrior, and DPS warrior in Wrath of the Lich King. Like, I tend to play DPS warrior in Wrath of the Lich King because protection warrior is like widely accepted as the lowest performing tank. There are a few fights where prot warrior really excels. It's not so obvious in this video, but in the end, we do wipe on Kel'Thuzad, and I do go prot warrior. But on this server, you know, Kel'Thuzad's a bit clunky because they buffed it, essentially. But I'll explain that when the time comes. So Gluth is about to die. I get my second Death Wish off. I don't get a second wreck. I'm 17 seconds or so away from getting a second wreck. But do I manage to squeeze in a couple of seconds of a second berserking troll racial? I don't know. But I definitely think troll is the way to go for horde. Just because I think the fights generally will be, I mean, it depends. I think if the fight is like 2 minutes and 20 seconds, you can get 2, what's it called? Blood Furies off as a orc, and that's attractive. But if the fights are short and you could only get 1 Blood Fury and 1 Berserking off, I think the Berserking is going to win. Like, for the passing, I think the troll is going to win. Also, like, engineering is so good. I can't remember actually what the percentage of haste is from the troll berserking. I know the engineering haste enchant on gloves is about 10%. I think, is it about 10% again? Or is it 20%? Yeah, it's crazy. Like, it's just crazy. 10 or 20% haste from troll racial for, I think is it 10 seconds again? Like, it's so good. But it has a 3-minute cooldown. So the cooldown is quite long. Blood Fury has a 2-minute cooldown. So again, if the fight is, 2 minutes 30 or something and you use 2 Blood Furies, obviously 2 Blood Furies versus 1 Berserking. Berserking gets weaker as a comparison. But yeah, if you're popping all your cooldowns, it's going to be insane. Like, Berserking, Lust or Hero, Engineering Gloves, Haste Pot, you're going to be popping off. And again, I imagine towards the end of the tier or in speed runs, the bosses are going to be dropping so quickly. and you do generally get a good amount of trash. I know, well, I guess between Thaddius and Gluth, these two bosses, there's not much trash, but generally speaking, there'll probably be at least 3 minutes or 2 minutes of trash. So you're going to have berserking up for every boss, which is nice. So we're coming up to Thaddius now. Thaddius gives you the debuff, and it stacks, increasing your damage when you're stacked with other people with the same positive or negative debuff. So what you basically want to do, when your debuff changes and you move from one side to another, you don't have the damage debuff. So that's the perfect time if your rotation has the window and gives you the opportunity. That's when you want to be buffing your shout or applying Sunder Armor, ideally. Sometimes, I don't think I do in this attempt, but sometimes I'll just, use my Sunder Armor just to get it up, just to get it on there, just so it saves me a global when I do have the increased damage debuff. So right now, I have the positive debuff, increasing my damage with everybody else here stacked with the positive debuff, and I need to apply Sunder Armor, and I reapply Sunder Armor whilst I've got the damage buff, which is a shame. Ideally, 1 or 2 seconds later, as I'm transitioning to the negative side, that would be the best time to use Sunder Armor or any non-damage global cooldown, because I don't have the debuff stack increasing my damage. But whatever. I'd rather use Sunder Armor when I have the damage debuff than not use Sunder Armor, have the Sunder stacks fade, and then need to use 5 global cooldowns. Sunder Armor almost fades there. Oh my god, I'm getting nervous watching this. Yeah. One thing I think I'll also do, and one thing I'm a big fan of generally, is having audio cues when you're wanting to be alerted of weak auras and things like that. So one thing I have in Classic right now is, I think at like 10 seconds, I have a text-to-speech MP3 file that just says Sunder Armor. So whenever the target has 10 seconds left of Sunder Armor, I just hear a voice say Sunder Armor. And that's just a really nice cue. I don't need to be looking at anything on my screen. I could be tying my shoelaces or doing whatever it is that I want to be doing whilst playing WoW. And I just hear Sunder Armor. And it's like, oh, okay, I need to be prepared to use Sunder Armor. Or at least stare at the Sunder Armor debuff and see if any of the other warriors in the raid are going to reapply it for me. Also, one thing that I learned from playing the Wrath of the Lich King beta, I guess I didn't one thing that refreshed, one opinion that changed, let's say, playing the Wrath of the Lich King beta is because you weren't allowed add-ons early on, and when you were initially allowed add-ons, I only had a couple, DBM and Details. My UI was very streamlined, let's say, very simple, and it's not really that simple now if you're looking at the video of this private server, and I kind of liked it when it was super clean and uncluttered. And one of the things is, when I'm thinking of I want to get an add-on or a weak aura, okay, so where do I want to put the add-on or the weak aura? Oh, well, the reason I installed this add-on or weak aura is because it gives me good information. Otherwise, why would I use the add-on or the weak aura, right? So it's worth installing, so it's worth seeing the visual cue of whatever it's telling me. Okay, so where on the screen do I want it to be? Well, in my mind, logically, near the middle, because that way I can see it all the time, but that just leads to every add-on being in the middle of the screen, right? Generally, because it's something that I think is important, otherwise I wouldn't have the add-on installed. So that just means there's loads of clutter in the middle of the screen. And playing on the beta without add-ons, it was really nice just to have such a clean area around my character. And normally I'd be looking at my character or in the middle of the screen, and then fights like Kel'Thuzad when there's the void zone or the fissure where you need to move out or you'll get killed. It was, normally I can see those AoEs because I'm expecting them to be coming because I know the mechanics of the fight. But the fact that the middle of my screen was so bare, it made seeing that fissure so easy. I was like, oh my god, this is insanely easy, because there aren't 10 things flashing at me in the middle of the screen. And I know it sounds really simple, and I agree, it's super simple, but I think that I just need to tone back the amount of things in the middle of my screen and really think let's say, what are the 3 most important things or 2 most important things that I want to have, and then maybe they can be in the middle of my screen. Otherwise, they the middle of the screen is the premium real estate, like maybe not have my Sundarama timer be so close to the middle until the Sundarama debuff is only in its final 10 seconds, let's say, because that's when it's important. When Sundarama is between 30 and 11 seconds left remaining, I don't care, right? I don't care. Like Sundarama, I mean, I might care if we're going into execute phase, where let's say the execute phase lasts 20 seconds. I want to pre-apply another Sundarama just before execute phase. So I guess it doesn't always work, but I can take a glance to the side when we're hitting 25% just to see the timer of Sundarama. Okay. And the same for, debuffs, I always have near the center of my screen. It's so awkward. I can't imagine playing, this is just a rant now, there's so many people who play WoW with the debuffs in the default location, which is literally next to the minimap in the top right hand corner. It almost couldn't be in a worse location for you to see the debuffs that are on your character. I find it wild that people play with their debuffs that far away. You need to move your mouse almost to the top right corner of the screen, literally the furthest away from where your mouse probably is, to mouse over, what's this debuff, how much damage does it do, or even move your eyes again to see the debuff. It's crazy to me. Anyway, rant over. So yeah, Sundarama's fade. Oh no, Sundarama's fade. So now I'm here reapplying the Sundaramas. Oh dear. Okay, anyway, yeah, I would debuffs, I think, are always going to be near the middle of my screen. I could definitely move them further away from the center of the screen. What else? I like having my character frame near the middle of my screen, and therefore the target as well. I use my character frame to see my rage and HP. Again, as someone who's played tank for so long, having your HP be known at all times is extremely important. Again, there are people who play with their character frame in the top left-hand corner, and again, that's same with your debuffs. It's if you're having to look in the top left-hand corner of your screen to look at how much HP you have, how much rage you have, that's wild. And then the top right-hand corner to see your debuffs. You're looking at the 2 top corners of your screen every time you want to see how your character's doing. And then looking at your character in the middle of the screen, and then looking at the bottom of your screen at your action bars, if your action bars are in the default position as well. So your eyes are just doing a marathon every time you're playing WoW. Crazy. Anyway, this boss is crazy on this attempt because we only have 1 priest, so there's only 1 ad being mind controlled. That's why it's crazy, and also why sometimes the boss is being dragged out of melee range, because we have a paladin taunting it who's ret, and then we have our second tank, I think the Death Knight, taunting it, and it's just going back and forth between the Death Knight tank and the ret paladin. So that's why this fight is crazy, and also why melee DPS is suffering here as a consequence. It's basically all the range casters, and then it's the DPS on the damage meter, because we're getting it pulled out of melee range. But I suppose the Sundarama only fades once, so that's something. It could fade more than once. But yeah, this fight is crazy. So yeah, just remember to bring 2 priests. Oh, also, if I'm offering some advice, in 25-man, bring 2 priests, because this fight. And in 10-man, oh my god, it's happened twice where we don't have replenishment, Replenishment is mana regen for the raid, and doing 10-man Nax without replenishment is a massive grief to the raid. Like, I will straight up refuse to attend a 10-man raid if we don't have the replenishment buff. Ret Paladin, Shadow Priest, Frost Mage. I don't think there are any others. Correct me if I'm wrong. They supply the replenishment mana regen. And what's the replenishment buff? It's similar to having a Shadow Priest in your group in terms of the amount of mana that you're getting replenished. It's so noticeable. It's unreal. Like, it's so good. Yeah, I've done... I did a Nax 10 where the Ret Paladin didn't spec replenishment. Okay. And I've done a Nax 10 where the Mage was arcane. Okay. And it's so much more difficult to do the raid when your healers and your mana users are running out of mana. It's literally day and night. It's either, do you want to run out of mana or do you not want to run out of mana? It's as simple as that. Like, it's crazy how beneficial having replenishment is. And yeah, I mean, that's probably the biggest probably the biggest single piece of advice going into Wrath of the Lich King is, in 25 mans you probably have a Ret or a Shadow Priest or both, and you have two sources of replenishment, which is great. So in 25 man you want to definitely make sure that you have it, but you probably have it anyway. Whereas in 10 man you're more likely to have it slip through the gap. Can we just take a moment to look at the damage meter? It's your boy T-Dubs, top of the damage meter. So yeah, Fury Warrior is bad in phase 1 apparently. I'd like to respectfully disagree. Obviously this fight is good for Warrior because I don't need to cast any spells. The ads are dying super duper quickly when they're initially spawning, particularly I think the non-elites. I think they're non-elite. So I'm getting bang 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 damage. Like, I'm doing a Bloodthirst, save my Whirlwind for when they're stacking, and then Whirlwinding. Bam. Good damage. And then the druids, they're like, trying to pick when I can use my Hurricane, because if I Hurricane everything, I'm just going to run out of mana. So yeah, it's very good for melee in this fight. And yeah, I'm pumping. And then obviously, my single target damage isn't as good as others. So I'm just thinking, as soon as the boss spawns, I'm like, oh my god, can I hold on to this first position? Because I know that the fight's definitely going to turn away from my favor. Also, I like Fat Finger and go into defensive stance for some reason there. I'm not quite sure what happened. Oh, dude, the knockback from the Shaman. I hate this stuff. Leveling, I hate the pushback from the Moonkin and the Shaman. I did one dungeon where I was playing Moonkin and my friend who I leveled with, who was playing Shaman, and he was tanking it on a Feral and I was playing Moonkin, and I'm just there typhooning and pushing back the mobs because I was complaining quite a lot about, we're just discussing the game, and just saying how like Typhoon and the Shaman pushback is really annoying, as well as the Affliction Warlock, their AoE stun. And he's like, yeah, whatever. And then as soon as like the first dungeon where I'm just typhooning and knocking back at the Moonkin, he's like, oh, right. Yeah, this is annoying. And I'm like, yeah, stop doing it, please. Or like Glyph so it doesn't do the knockback. Like, it's massive. Now, it's difficult to see the damage meter because there's some bugged out frame on top of it, but my name is there. Trust me, I am top of the damage meter. So I'm here just trying to stay ahead on the single target of Gothic the Harvester, and spoiler alert, yeah, I stay on top. So hallelujah. There's one fight where Fury is number 1. Again, I don't think that other people in this raid are necessarily trying to pump as hard as I am. So take it with a grain of salt again. It's a private server. I'm, top 3rd geared in the raid. What else? Other people maybe aren't using as many, aren't pre-potting like I am, although the pre-pot, quite frankly, doesn't do that much for me. So, you know, when Classic actually comes out, you know, expect the whole raid to be pumping or to be on a more similar level to you. But at the same time, I'm not quite full bis, and Warrior scales amazingly with gear. So, yeah, if you're in full bis, you can maybe... I don't know. We'll see. Will Warrior be as good as this in full bis in Classic? We will see. One fight that I did recently was a Sapphiron 3 Drakes, and my damage was very, very good. Partly because Whirlwind and Cleave on the ads uptime was pretty good. But at the same time, when you're doing 3 Drakes, you often have 2 of the Drakes up at the same time, and then Cleave Whirlwind definitely works well there, and it's not just extra damage on the elementals. Although, you know, elemental damage is important. You don't want the elementals to be alive. Oh, also one thing, I remember doing this before on I don't know what server it was, but jumping in here actually counts as like the goo. I get the debuff and I'm like, oh wait, this is actually the same debuff as like a patchwork. So, I lose a load of HP. I'm like, oops, that wasn't good. So don't jump in that little hole of goo, that little goo corner. This is a weird fight. We go for the Cleave to start with, and then we just need to reset our stacks to continue killing which mob is this? Baron Rivendare. It's a bit hard for me to see it on the preview. The preview isn't crystal clear for me to watch this footage whilst I'm doing the commentary in my editing software, but we'll get through. And then they're having some problems in the back of the raid. We're being called to send someone to Blamo just to soak and go into defensive stance here, and you know, I sacrifice myself. Oh, this is, I think, is a good fight. This is Noth the Plague Bringer, and I think I do quite well in this fight. Let's see. So this is a fight where I'm prioritizing on the pull my Bloodthirst, Whirlwind, and Slam. And then when I don't have those, I will be using my Sunder Armor. So Sunder Armor goes up onto the boss slowly as a consequence, but it means that I can whore out on the damage a bit more. Although looking at it, I'm literally bottom of the damage meter almost. So it's not going very well so far. But now we have some ads spawning. I can start doing some damage. And I make the mistake here. I thought I was attacking the boss for a second. I'm like, oh, there's a nameplate here with like 80% HP. This is probably the boss. And I start attacking it, and it's like, oh no, that's an ad. Although with the slow debuff and the blink, it can be tricky to get on the boss as a melee. And you can't, you don't always get a master spell from the priest. Also, the tank needs to be very quick at taunting the boss back after the blink. The blink is a threat reset, so melee can be caught out, and I'm just here cleaving the ads whilst the boss gets brought back closer to melee because I just want to do some damage. I want to pump. I want to see what the potential is of Fury. I want to show Fury in the best light and just see what is possible. So, you know, now we've had some ads, a bit of Whirlwind going off, and oh look, I'm a 3rd, 4th on the damage meter. Cool. Let's keep going, okay? I think the boss has teleported away, and now we've just got ads. And ads are good for me because that means, well, when there's more than one at once, I can do some good damage, and it's nice. Like it definitely. Like what I should do is, well, maybe I'll put it in the description. When I started playing on this server, like a few weeks in, because there aren't really like logs to speak of, I have all my raid footage recorded, and I was just taking screenshots of the boss damage after we'd killed each boss to just compare damage of each other and to see the progression of the gearing throughout the weeks. And my damage definitely has gone up. Fury, like we used to play with the Arms Warrior as well, but he's since quit. And I was consistently ahead of him on every fight, apart from the first week I played in this guild. he beat me on a couple of fights. Like, I don't know, let's say like maybe 20 or 30%, 40% maybe, I don't know, of the fights in the first week of 25 mans. And then I think since then I beat him, I think more or less on every single fight, with the difference being greater and greater as we both got more and more gear. But I maybe got a little bit more gear than he did, but still, I think I would have still remained on top. Again, because the fights aren't short enough for Bladestorm uptime to be really, really high. So I can just whirlwind and cleave to catch up. You know, I'm like, arms does less damage typically, and then they spike during Bladestorm. But if the fight isn't short and Bladestorm uptime isn't high, then I just steamroll with my consistency of a high AoE versus the spike of an arms warrior. So I'm 4th on damage. Will I end up beating the Death Knight? Hopefully. I can't remember, honestly, but we'll see. We'll see. Oh, I have Recklessness available. I go for Execute. Do I Whirlwind with Wreck? Oh no, I remember. I'm super annoyed because that last Whirlwind happens after the boss dies. So I've got a Wreck Whirlwind that does nothing. Oh no. Oh, this is another fight that isn't very melee friendly. Oh, that's another thing to talk about actually. Like Malagos is not a melee friendly fight, and Heigan the Unclean is again not a melee friendly fight. But if you kill him before he phases and you do the dance, then I suppose it can be a melee friendly fight. But that's a big consideration as well. That isn't specific just to Warrior or Arms or Fury, but obviously melee as a whole if the fight favors ranged. So something to consider as well. It's not just Arms versus Fury, but also melee versus ranged. So we're just doing the dance slowly. The tank's moving him around. The tank's doing a good job, actually. I commend the tank here. Like consistent little movements that melee can all follow with. One thing that I tend to do is just run with the boss at full speed when I'm tanking, and you know, melee just keep up. At least that's what I'm saying. But doing this like stutter step thing is actually kind of nice as a melee. You know, I think all tanks, if they don't play a melee, should at some point. Particularly a melee that cleaves, like a warrior or a rogue, just so that they're more aware of like the positioning, the movement, and just stacking mobs together. Like whenever I play melee, particularly if I'm playing like not a Tauren, where the hitbox is a bit less. Like if I'm playing Orc in like tier 5 Serpent Shrine Caverns, when you're doing the platforms around Lurker, it's so annoying when you're trying to cleave those mobs and the tanks aren't dragging them close together for better cleaving. And it's just like, this is so frustrating. I literally can't cleave whilst attacking Skull. It's very frustrating. And I think if that's the case, just get your tanks to play a cleaving spec or class for a raid, and it'll open their eyes up to, wow, there's so much time where I could be cleaving where I'm not. Even if it's like a little bit, even if it's like an extra like 5% of the raid where they could be cleaving, it's like that's worth trying to optimize, you know. So going back to the Heigan, the Unclean, having to redo Sunders after the dance phase. I can't remember what my damage was before the dance phase, but it was better than 13th, because obviously the range can still attack. Hunters in particular, I think we've not got our main hunter. We used to have a hunter in the guild who was top damage. I think because he was able to do a lot of his damage during the dance as well. Obviously, if you're a caster, you need to be stood still hard casting. But then as a hunter, you can just, between the, I want to call it the swing time, during the time between auto shots of your ranged weapon, you can move and you don't really get penalized outside of, do hunters cast steady shot? I don't know how hunters work in Wrath of the Lich King. I'm so much better versed in TBC than I am Wrath of the Lich King. That's one of the reasons why I'm looking forward to making more Wrath of the Lich King content, because I want to learn and make content as I learn, instead of TBC where I'm assuming that everyone knows this when it's not the case. Like a lot of people go into TBC fresh or needing to relearn a lot of things, whereas playing so many private servers as I have in TBC, it's hard for me to think what is the interesting information. Speaking of interesting information, this room is interesting information in terms of how good Warrior is. So I hope there to be more like gauntlets like this, just because it favors Warrior so massively. You know, Death Knights have their death and decay and their diseases, but death and decay stays in one position, similar to a consecration. And I'm just here rolling my whirlwind on cooldown and cleaving, and I'm doing some good damage. Hell yeah, brother. So yeah, this is my favorite. This is my favorite part of Nax. Just killing these maggots. Here we go. Die, die, die. Lovely. Also, I don't know where the rest of the melee are. Are they just ignoring these ads? I don't know. I'm surprised we don't pull that last eye on the corner. Anyway, we make it through, and looks like I did good damage. Speaking of good damage, Loatheb. Normally, I like to get myself a nice early spore buff. But, yeah, this was so funny. So, a bit of story time. We were all told to hug right leg if we don't have the spore buff. So, the spores would be death gripped onto the right leg, and if you have the spore, you go to the left leg. So, there's this first spore. I don't get it. 5 other people get it. Okay, whatever. I missed the first spore. So 5 people are basically critting all the time, or almost all the time now that they have the spore buff. And now just waiting for another spore. And I'm like, oh, that sucks. My damage isn't going to be insane because people are going to be critting ahead of me. Okay, whatever. I can't expect to have the first spore all the time. And then this rogue starts killing the spore. And it's like, bro, we're waiting for the spore to come to the right-hand side. Anyway, it gets killed. And like nobody gets that spore. So Discord is just going crazy now because no one's following the strategy of what we agreed before the poll. Anyway, I think the third spore, finally, I have a spore buff. So now I move to the left leg and start blasting. Okay, I use my cooldowns. I use everything because I have like 96% crit or thereabouts. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good. So I go from being, 15th on the damage meter, and we'll see how I fare at the end. Spoiler alert, I go up the damage meter. Am I top 5 by the end? I don't know. Let's see. I can't remember. So this is a fun fight just because it means you have really high crit chance. The thing about having high crit chance is my offhand white attacks are generating me a healthy amount of rage. And what does a healthy amount of rage means? It means lots of heroic strikes. One thing that I really like, and I think Sims don't take this into account because it's difficult to, is when you hit the threshold of being able to consistently or absolutely spam heroic strike, it really helps your damage. By that I mean, if you're having to monitor your rage and, I'm high rage, use heroic strike. I'm low rage, I need to hold back on heroic strike. That's a decision that you need to monitor always. And that's going to use quite a lot of focus from you whilst playing to make sure you don't make a mistake where I used a heroic strike when I was on, 30 rage. And now, whirlwinds come off cooldown and I don't have enough rage to perform a whirlwind. And also, my offhand, I need to wait a long time. Again, because you're playing Fury with two-handers, and you need to wait a long time for your offhand to get the next auto attack to generate the rage you need to perform your whirlwind. So, I quickly use blood rage to generate some additional rage. And, that's fine, but, it slows you down. And sometimes you won't have blood rage to get you the extra rage. So what I'm saying is when you can consistently just hit heroic strike and not worry about rage starving, that's going to give you a huge DPS boost just because it's one less choice you're having to make. You're not consistently monitoring your rage. You can just forget about rage for the most part and just spam heroic strike, and that's really good. Whereas like a spreadsheet or a sim won't, it's very difficult to put into a calculator your heroic strike usage. And that's interesting. I mean, one thing you can do is just say how many heroic strikes you did in the fight or whatever, but yeah, it's tricky. So I think that hit is perhaps something that you can value more than what perhaps a sim or a spreadsheet suggest. Also, one thing I'm doing from time to time is when I have an empty global is going into battle stance and using rend. I'm also glyphing for rend and talenting 3 points in improved rend. And this is just extra damage. So say that I have my Bloodthirst and my Whirlwind on cooldown. What else am I doing? I've got spare time, particularly when it's straight after a Bloodthirst. One thing that's a bit annoying when you're low gear, again, is because you don't have the rage, is if you're going into battle stance to rend, you're losing potentially, 100 rage if you're up to 100 rage. And then you're rending, and then you're going back into your berserk stance, and maybe, you struggle to generate the rage again, and it means that your Bloodthirst or Whirlwind gets delayed. That's really bad. But once you, again, have the good attack power, so your offhand deals more damage and generates more rage, or you have enough hit rating where you're consistently hitting with the offhand and generating rage, you can just, your rage is always going to be there. Even when you're stance dancing, you're going to be generating rage reliably, predictably, consistently. So you're not going to be caught without the rage for your main rotation. So, I mean, that's just something that I've kind of witnessed gearing up my warrior. And I think that's interesting to think about as well. It's nice using sims or spreadsheets, but it's also nice thinking about, the stats themselves yourself. Why, like an extra layer on top of whatever the sim or spreadsheet says. So here we are on Sapphiron. We're going to have a bit of time. I just pre-pot early because I'm using an armor pot. It lasts 2 minutes. So if I miss 10-15 seconds of the armor pot, I don't really mind. It's more important that I armor pot early than try and squeeze out every last second, because on occasion I'll be too late. So here is Sapphiron. Always remember that Sapphiron has a really big hitbox. I like to use the green circle as a reference for melee. I can stand a little bit further away from melee, but loads of melee stand really close. This paladin on the left, I think he's going to get tail whipped if he stands there. He does move to the right a little bit more. But also dodging the blizzard. It's really easy if you know that you have a large area and you're more familiar with the hitbox. Otherwise, you feel like you don't have that many options when you're wanting to move from blizzard. If you're familiar with the hitbox, you can definitely move around and feel like you have a bit more freedom. So how are we doing on the damage? So we're 7th, 8th, we're middle of the pack, doing okay damage. Oh, one thing I hate about Sapphiron is ranged. When they feel like they need to run away from the boss or stand max range. Guys, we're not 40 members in a raid here anymore. We're 25 or 10 man. You don't need to spread out and use the entire room or half the room. You can really be closer. As a melee, I want to see frost tombs, ice tombs, whatever they're called, in melee range, okay? Because it's a huge grief on all the melee when we need to spend 3 or 4 seconds running out of melee range to get behind a frost tomb, and then 3 or 4 seconds after the AoE to run back into melee range. It's frustrating. And yeah, I don't know. It's just one of those things that annoys me. Also, I think if the tomb is close enough to the boss, you can even melee the boss, maybe, whilst you're behind the tomb, or maybe not. But even so, just stand to the side of the tomb, melee, wait until the AoE is coming in 3, 2, 1, and then hide behind the tomb, save yourself dying from the AoE, and then just go back, and you lose very little uptime on the boss as melee. And that's what I want to see as a melee DPS. But yeah, it's awkward, particularly when melee themselves don't help themselves, and during the air phase, melee are running into range and spreading out. It's bro, you don't need to run into range to stop from tombing 2 people during the air phase. I'd gladly have ranged come closer to the boss. Oh, one thing that this is a private server, and you can see the tomb, but you can also see the Death Knight or whoever. His body is not inside the tomb. So I just get scared looking at that, and I'm just like, I don't know whether I need to hide behind the tomb, or if because it's a private server I should be hiding behind the player, because the player is like moved outside of the tomb because he was jumping or something. So I just go to the ranged tomb, knowing that that one's going to be safer. You know, there's no question in my mind that that one's going to be the safest option. But that looked funny. Also, as I mentioned on my Unrelenting Assault video, on the beta, even on the last day of the beta on Sapphiron, when the tomb is up, you do not want to, like, if you're the tomb person, do not move, okay? When the tomb ends, do not move. Wait a second after the tomb ends and then go back into your whatever position, because I've done it in 2 Nax raids where I'm tanking or DPSing and I'm the tomb, okay? When the tomb fades, I immediately want to go back into the tanking position if I'm tanking, or I immediately want to get back into melee as a melee DPS, right? But the bug on Sapphiron in the beta, including the last day of raid testing, was if you move as soon as the tomb ends, that calculates as the tomb moving, and people hiding behind the tomb die as a consequence. So until I see a blue post saying that this is fixed, whenever I'm in Nax, I'm going to tell the people in the tomb, do not move if you're a tomb, even after the tomb ends for 1 second, because people behind the tomb will die. So that's one of the biggest bugs that I encountered during the Sapphiron encounter on the beta. So hopefully I can share this information with you and save some wipes, because it's quite a long fight and it's not a fight that you really want to be repeating. But speaking of fights that you don't want to be repeating, oh my god, Kel'Thuzad. This is the most boring fight in Wrath of the Lich King. Is it the most boring fight in Classic? I mean, some of the level 61s I suppose were boring. But Phase 1, definitely the most boring fight. Phase 1 is so long. It just lasts an unnecessarily long amount of time. I think a nice change would be if you kill all the ads or you pull them and AoE them down, you transition immediately into P2. That would be nice, because it means that, you know, there's a chance of dying if you mess it up, but if you're a good raid, you're going to get into Phase 2 quicker and have a quicker kill. Also make it more interesting for speedruns, because some speedruns might pull people refer to them as cubbies, and I find that to be such a funny word. It sounds funny, cubby. So each of these like segments of the room where the ads reside in P1, speedruns might pull more than one cubby at once, and I think that'd be fun. See if they're putting 2 or 3 or more to kind of increase the risk factor, and it's on the last boss as well, so I think that'd be really fun. But yeah, P1 is super boring, super easy. People fall asleep. Yeah, it's just not a good time. And then P2 even isn't that fun. A reminder: use your intimidating shout as a warrior. Use your Hammer of Justice or whatever. Just get your cooldowns that are going to be annoying if you're CC'd, because if you're CC'd and you're going to be using intimidating shout on the raid, it's not going to be a good time, and I believe that's what happens on this attempt. So from me, so often I'm the guy calling out using use your annoying MC abilities. Now I don't on this attempt, because I'm just concentrating on my own thing, trying to do damage, which seems to be working. You know, I'm number 5 on damage as a Fury Warrior, so that's going pretty well. But I contribute to the wipe. Spoiler alert, we're gonna wipe here. So regardless, I've said this for years, always bring the player, not the class. Bring the player, not the spec. You know, Fury Warrior might be good damage, it might be bad damage, who cares? But if I'm going to be wiping the raid because I'm not using intimidating shout and I'm getting mind controlled on Kel'Thuzad and contributing to wiping the raid by fearing the raid, it doesn't matter how much damage I was doing or what debuffs I was applying. You know, if I feared the healers, that's the bigger impact. Now, obviously, if you're playing in a high-end raid where people aren't failing and you're wanting to min-max, then yeah, like the class makes a big impact. But again, so does the player skill and the player mechanics and everything, because it all, scales in the same direction, Anyway, on this server, the beetle ads in this final phase aren't slowable. Now, they are slowable and stunnable on the beta, but on this server, they are not. So the Paladin is just phase tanking all of them. So that's interesting. Like this Kel'Thuzad is more difficult on this server than it is on the beta, because I think he has more HP. Yeah, I mean, dude, Kel'Thuzad alone has like 29 mil HP, which is loads. Like, it's like double or something what Kel'Thuzad has on beta. I don't know how much he has on beta. Can't remember. But okay, so now I've gone tank spec. Tanking is one. I might do a Kel'Thuzad. Did I tank Kel'Thuzad on the beta? Maybe only in 10 man. Not sure. But anyway, I might do a Kel'Thuzad. I don't know if I want to do a Kel'Thuzad video, but you'll get the TLDR here. Essentially, if you're playing, the warrior is one of the best, if not the best, tanks for the ads in the last phase. Oh, this is hilarious. Again, private server, so numbers might change. I'm just here sending my tank rotation into the boss, right? I'm shield slamming, devastate, 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 shield slam, devastate, oh, sword and board. Get another shield slam in. Anyway, I'm just blasting my rotation, and I'm not thinking there's a chance that I can pull threat on the boss. Spoiler alert, I pull threat on the boss. I take 1 melee swing dodge, 2 melee swing, 3 melee, I'm dead. Okay. I don't want to call out the tank here, but I think there's enough time for the tank to taunt the boss back. One thing as a tank that is crucial is having a really viewable, visible target of target frame. You can see my target of target frame is as big as my target frame and my player frame, and my target of target frame is as big. My target of target frame doesn't need to be as big. That's the third one along, or the one at the far right. But you need to know what the boss is attacking, because as a tank, if it's not you, you need to react. Obviously, when the boss is doing abilities like attacking a random raid member, the boss will often target the random raid member the boss is doing the ability on. So if it's doing a whatever, I don't know, a random ability. But yeah, when it's targeting somebody else, particularly when they're losing HP, it's worth having a taunt. And I believe, Kel'Thuzad is tauntable. And I'm yelling at the Fel Druid, oh, mind the fissure. That's the void zone thing you see that the Druid just managed to avoid. Okay, so 45% HP is when we have the beetle ads coming out. This is less of a DPS video now, more of a tank one. But to be honest with you, DPS is the same as the rest of the dungeon, whereas tanking, you can this is one of the fights where prop warrior does really well. So what you do is you put vigilance on the tank who's on Kel'Thuzad, so that the vigilance you get so the taunt is being refreshed every time the main tank is taking damage from the boss. So that's really good, just to have taunt be available more often. So we're hitting 45%. I do my final devastate. Sorry, but Sunder Arms are going to fade because I'm not on the boss. And then it's just a case of taunting, heroic throw, taunting again. And the Paladin just picks them up and taunts them. And that's fine. I don't care who of us tanks them. In many ways, it's easier, at least initially, when these beetles... so essentially, these beetles get a buff that stacks similar to growth stacks from Gruul, except it's quicker, increasing their damage. So now they have 2 stacks. And all the beetles, they have the same stacks as each other. So their damage increases over time, and that's kind of like the soft enrage. The tanks on the ads are going to die because they just take so much damage from these beetle ads. Now, what I'm doing, like, obviously, once they're slowable, it's super duper easy, because I'll just, what I like to do is just build up a bit of threat or a lot of threat whilst they're not doing too much damage when they don't have too many stacks of their buff. And because no one's attacking these, it's only healers you have to contend with. So you have lots more threat than them. And then you want to just shockwave them. And what I like to do is just hop into battle stance and then just hamstring. And then you'll just hamstring each of them individually and then just kite them maybe with a hunter trap or something. And then just keep hamstringing them. Because hamstring is a single target, the hamstring is staggered. So the mobs will have their hamstring end in a staggered manner because you applied hamstring in a staggered manner. So the theory is you'll only have one beetle in melee range of you at a time because hamstring is ending on one beetle at a time, if you catch my drift. But when we're using 2 tanks on the beetles like this, I just want to make sure that I'm second threat on the beetles so that if the paladin tank dies, all the beetles are then going to run to me. I want to be far enough away from these beetles so I can preemptively use cooldowns. So the paladin is like my buffer. Like I'm like level 2 if you like. Like I just want to make sure I get thunderclap and demo shout on his beetles as well, just to give him the best option of staying alive. So that's my theory here. So just be second on damage, and if the paladin dies, you know, it'll take the beetles 2 or 3 seconds to run to me, at which point I can use cooldowns. Okay, well that wraps up the Nax from mostly a Fury point of view. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like, leave a comment. Mad props if you made it to the end of the video. Let me know your thoughts on a Fury warrior. Are you planning on playing warrior, protection, or Fury? Are you going against the meta and, you know, playing protection warrior? My general advice is if you're playing prot warrior in Sunwell, which is not a meta tank now, you'll have no problem playing prot warrior in Wrath of the Lich King because it's still not a meta tank. So if you're playing not a meta tank now in Sunwell, that's fine. You can play a non-meta tank in Wrath of the Lich King. And Fury is not a top DPSer in pre-raid gear, but I do think lots of people will be surprised with how well Warrior can pump in even phase 1 in Wrath of the Lich King. Very similar to how a lot of people were caught off guard with how well Fury Warrior was in phase 1 of the Burning Crusade Classic. With that, I will say thank you once more for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe, help the channel out, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care. Bye.